before I begin, I'm going to read a statement. There's a national organization called Writers for Democratic Action. It's a national organization. In almost each state has a steering committee. So I am part of the North Carolina steering committee. And here's the letter. We are writers. We value truth, both the truthfulness of facts and the truth of the human heart. This is our core truth. As citizens of a democracy, we enjoy many precious freedoms, including the freedom to express our views without fear of censorship or reprisal. To guard this and other freedoms, we wholeheartedly accept the responsibility and duties, the citizenship to our local communities, our state, and our nation. Our most important civic duty is to vote. Voting is a fundamental right, but it is also our prime obligation as stewards of democracy. We live in a moment when democracy is under attack, not just in foreign countries, but right here in the United States of America. There are too many politicians and their supporters who would rather simply take power than win it at the ballot box by persuasion and reasoned argument. They would rather many of our citizens did not exercise the right and duty to vote. They make it difficult for certain kinds of citizens to vote, especially the young, the poor, and those in minority communities. They contort voting districts through gerrymandering to guarantee the outcomes they desire. They even seek to manipulate the process of counting and certifying ballots. The only sure way to counter the cynical attack on our democracy is to vote. In every election, for every office, no matter how convenient or frustrating the process can seem, standing in line to cast our vote is the most powerful means we have to keep our democracy alive, to guarantee that the freedoms we now enjoy remain intact, and that we indeed offer liberty and justice to all. When you cast your ballot, your vote is irrevocably recorded, booked. It's a simple process, but crucial to our future as free citizens. So please stand with us and do your part. Book your vote. Yours, in the spirit of democracy, the North Carolina membership of Writers for Democratic Action Steering Committee, Jill McCorkle, Jackie Shelton Green, Joseph Bathanti, Bland Simpson, Bell Boggs, Thomas Mills, Wiley Cash, Lynn York, Alex Albright, Margaret Bauer, Gabriel Cavo-Coresi, Michael Parker, Stephanie Elizondo Greist, and the late Philip Gerard.
Wow, good.
Thanks. I'm going to read a short story from this book. And just let me say a few words about the book. The book's narrator, in their linked stories, sometimes called a broken novel, sometimes called a novel and story, so that the same characters appear in each story, sometimes in varying places. The stories aren't set chronologically. They're narrated by a young man named Fritz Sweeney. You know, the stories are roughly probably from the beginning, probably from the very late 50s to the middle 70s. They're set in my hometown of Pittsburgh. Fritz Sweeney's mom is Rita Sciaretta Sweeney, a splenetic Italian woman, and his father is Travis Sweeney, a kind of mellow, reflective, contemplative Irish. The name of the story is called The Gazebo, and the gazebo was a real place. It was a delicatessen in kind of a ritzy neighborhood, not the one I grew up in, called Shadyside in Pittsburgh. And as I kind of grew up, I used to go there and kind of glory in just the riches of the gazebo and dream about being one of those people, I think. And this is roughly, I want to say this is roughly maybe 1973. So, you know, I have students here. I would have been maybe a year or two older than y'all. To escape the summer heat of Claire's apartment, she and I drove to David's. the theater on Walnut Street in Shadyside to see Citizen Kane. One of Claire's professors at Pitt had screened it in class, and Claire was convinced that I should see it. I was glad to go, mainly for the air conditioning, but I would have done anything to please her. After the movie, we walked a few paces to the gazebo, a delicatessen Claire was enchanted with. As I listened to Claire talk about the movie, she called it brilliant, miracle. Maybe it was. I knew I hadn't been paying attention. She said Kane is a guy who tries to fill up his emptiness with things, attempting to buy heart and soul with money and power, an indictment of capitalism, the living, breathing Marxist allegory. I didn't disagree, though I didn't know anything about Marx. But Kane is not unlike the rest of us. He just seems much more fortunate than most. After all, even though he is issued from down-on-their-luck working stiffs, he ends up with money and power. And for a while, he is young and handsome, and who knows, maybe even fleetingly happy, way more than most of us can expect. The people I came from, a different batch of down-on-their-luck working stiffs, did not have money or power, and had little prospects for either. Their emptiness gnawed holes in them. I don't remember much about what I contributed to this conversation about Citizen Kane. I might have just sat there and listened and not said a word. Kane has a heart. I liked him. I liked the movie. And you don't have to be in college, which I wasn't, to get Rosebud. That late afternoon, the gazebo with Claire, I wanted clarity, not parables. More than anything, I was reminded of something I knew to be absolutely ex-cathedra true, but had never really allowed myself to dwell on. Everything means something else. Not only that, but everybody is also somebody else. It's hard to make your way when things aren't what they seem, and I suppose Charles Foster Kane knows that all along. Surely Orson Welles, the man who made the film, in 1941, when he was only 25, just 5 years older than I was that very warm day, keenly understood this. Claire was not beautiful, some would say not even pretty. She had recently cut her long brown hair. It barely covered her ears, bangs chopped to an inch of her scalp line, eyebrows heavy and arched, thin nose with the slightest hook to it, enormous silvery eyes, bowed, exaggerated lips, immaculate skin like a baby. She looked like Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I was pleased to be with her. I was fascinated by her willingness to say what she really felt. Before my romance with Claire, I had never set foot inside the gazebo. I hadn't even known it existed, but it wasn't a place I would have ever entered on my own. Perhaps I was a little intimidated by what I perceived as its high tone, but then again, I would have never gone to see Citizen Kane of my own volition either. An older woman in a royal blue, sleeveless dress sprinkled with giant sunflowers walked over to our table. She wore 3 or 4 bracelets on either wrist. Her hair was dyed bright orange, her heavily wrinkled face caked with makeup. She stood there for an awkward amount of time and stared at me. I was about to say something when she said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" I smiled. "I guess not. I'm Madeline DeSantis, an old friend of your family." I studied her. I had no idea who she was. As far as I knew, my family had no old friends. She smiled, a big orange lipstick smile. Wrinkles branched across her face like an oracle. "Joseph David Del Greco," she whispered. "Little Joey Del Greco." I looked into her tiny brown eyes. "Little Joey," she whispered. "Look at you, you're a grown man." I sat there and smiled. You remember me, don't you? Madeline asked. She took my face in her hands. You couldn't forget old Madeline. Of course I remember you, Madeline, I said. It just took me a minute. How could I ever forget you? How have you been? Still with my face viced between her hands, Madeline gazed at me soulfully, held me like that for a long moment. Our eyes locked, tears in hers, then gave me a big kiss on the lips. From across the table, I felt Claire's incredulity. I stood and pulled out a chair. Please, Madeline, sit with us. For 1 minute, she said. I have a table toward the back. I held a chair for her, slipped it under her as she sat, and as I did, she reached back and patted my hand. I sat and motioned to Claire. Madeline, this is Claire Raffo. I'm so charmed, Madeline said, lurching up from her chair and across the table. Claire, in a similar move, met her mid-table where they bridged, then kissed and held each other. It's wonderful to meet you, Madeline, said Claire. I've heard so much about you. Claire was now complicit, all in, like me, playing along. What the heck, I thought. Claire and I are engaged. I chanced a quick glance at Claire. She looked at me and smiled. Oh my God, Madeline exclaimed, then kissed me, made the bridge with Claire again, and kissed me another time when she sat down. That is just the most wonderful news. But so young. But listen to me, it's none of my business. When you find the right one, and I know this, because I was 17 when I married my Prince Charming, you know. She wagged her finger. You two know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? Claire and I beamed. I even felt it, as if we were really getting married. I reached across the table and Claire took my hand. When's the big day? Madeline asked. We're in no rush, Claire said. Maybe a year or so. You're smart, said Madeline. I'm so nosy, but I have to see the ring. Claire removed her left hand from her lap and slid it across the table to Madeline. A slender silver band with a fake jade pebble at its crown. I'd been with Claire when she bought it for $1 at the Red Quill, a 5 and 10 across the street. Oh my God, said Madeline, this time in a near shriek that occasioned glances toward our table. That's just gorgeous. I'm so happy for you two. God love you both. Such exciting news. Then to me, I know how happy your grandmother is about this. She's ecstatic, I said without hesitation. How is she, Madeline asked. It's been forever. I don't know how long since she and I talked. She told me you're at Bucknell. You're going to be a lawyer like your papa. She's so proud. She never mentioned the wedding. Joey proposed just a week ago, said Claire, covering like a champ. I instantly liked being Joey Del Greco and had the knack for it too. I wore a white shirt, jeans, and flip-flops. I was thin and strong and tan from working construction all summer. I had just seen Citizen Kane with my mysterious fiancée with whom I sipped coffee and ate Reuben sandwiches, latkes, and applesauce. I was bright and handsome. I studied pre-law at Bucknell. I was Joseph David Del Greco, little Joey, which might mean my dad was Big Joey Del Greco, a gunslinger lawyer, maybe a kingpin racketeer who long ago salted away my ample inheritance. But there was the matter of this grandmother of mine whom Madeline had mentioned. And what the hell really was I doing? And Claire too, perpetuating this masquerade. My mother's name, my real mother, was Rita Sweeney, Rita Sharetta Sweeney. My dad, my real dad, was Travis Sweeney, whose parents had died before my birth. My real mother's real mother, my only grandmother, whom I rarely saw, was also dead. She and my mother had shared an unspeakable secret that had something to do with my mother's father, Federico, after whom I was named, who perished when his cobbler shop had inexplicably burned to the ground in 1942. Rita's life, and by extension my history, my very birthright, was a vast labyrinthine estate like Cain's Xanadu, a maze of triple locked rooms to which I was forbidden entry. But Joey Del Greco's grandmother was fine, absolutely thriving. I had just seen her Sunday, 3 days ago, when the whole family, as usual, dropped in on her. This is what I told Madeline. Marvelous, she said. I bet she made pizza. Nobody makes pizza like my grandma. And that divine chocolate cake with seafoam icing, a masterpiece. I smiled and nodded. You look just like your grandfather, Giuseppe, a good man. You were named for him. Gone too young, tears again appeared in her eyes. I smiled and nodded again, then slightly bowed my head out of respect for my new dead grandfather. You're a good boy, Madeline said, as if to reward me. Then to Claire, how about you, honey? Are you in school? I'm at Pitt, studying psychology. God love you young people, she said, so smart. Minds of your own, nobody tells you what to do. Then back to me, darting in to kiss me again. I can't get over how handsome and grown up. She motioned toward me and said to Claire, since diapers, I've known this one. Now look at him. Look at you both, like movie stars, important people. What about you, Madeline? How are you? Claire asked. Madeline slightly lifted her hand from the table, fingers splayed in a spider, the gesture so familiar, so exquisite, that meant, in essence, what does it matter? I do fine, she said. I stay busy. I need to be closer. I need to be in closer touch with people like Joey's grandmother. Claire took her hand from mine, reached across the table, and patted Madeline's hand. Come sit with us, Madeline. There's plenty of room. Join us, please. I don't want to intrude on you young people. I just had to say hello. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw little Joey sitting there. I shouldn't call him little. You can call him anything you'd like, Madeline, Claire said. That's absolutely true, Madeline, I added. We'd love for you to sit with us. You're nice, she said. I'd love to. I'll be right back. All I have is coffee. Madeline nipped off, and Claire and I looked at each other. What in hell are you doing, Joey? She asked. I don't know, but you're doing it too. Why'd you ask her to sit with us? How will we get out of this? She's lonesome, said Claire. I know. I love you, Claire said. Claire had never said that to me before. I don't think anyone had ever said that to me before. Claire had fallen for Joey Del Greco. It was obvious Madeline had me mixed up with someone else, and instead of stringing her along, I should have told her from the outset that I wasn't Joey Del Greco. I was Fritz Sweeney. Claire called me exclusively Frederick, my given name, and had once told me that no one is just a Fritz. But I didn't want to part with this new persona that had been handed me by a stranger who seemed to know me from elsewhere. A better me, the me I aspired to. Madeline, whom I liked very much, she clearly liked me, was suddenly part of my life, where this other life of mine was Joey Del Greco, that I had my foot in the door of and tried to imagine. Cain forgets who he is and exchanges one life for another, a kind of amnesia that surely afflicts many from time to time. And of course, I was having a good time, being clever, feeling important, deftly improvising an entire identity at the expense of Madeline. Sooner or later, I'd hit a dead end, and Madeline would find me out. But I wanted to go on with the charade a little longer and see where it led. For the moment, I didn't want to go back to being Fritz Sweeney. Claire could have halted it instantly as well, yet she had signed on without hesitation. A future with Claire would be a maze from which I'd never emerge, navigating a life of interminable interpretation, nothing black and white, neither yes nor no, nothing settled, dead end after dead end. Claire seemed able to see into that future, but I could not. I knew she and I would never marry. Or maybe I knew we should never marry. Nevertheless, as Joey Del Greco, with whom Claire was so smitten, I was prepared that night to spirit her and that dollar ring off to the all-night ordinary and disastrously declare, till death do us part. Madeline rejoined us with her little cup of coffee and dainty saucer. I stood until she sat. Such a gentleman, she said. Such gorgeous manners. That's what comes from the right upbringing. Our people, when they came over here, had not a cent to their names, couldn't even speak the language, treated like scum. Then the Depression, then the war. Me and your grandmother, we could tell stories, but now, look at you and this beautiful girl. Seeing you too, the hardship and sacrifice was all worth it. It looked like Madeline might break down, but she took a sip of coffee and smiled. Listen to me, boring you two college people. Don't let your food get cold. Mange. You know what that means. When we nodded, she laughed uproariously. Madeline's hand shook as she brought the cup to her lips. Her eyes were wet. Are you all right, Madeline? Claire asked. Oh, I'm fine, honey. You know, the old gray mare. I'll be 81 in April. It just creeps up on you and has no mercy. You look terrific, Claire said. I hope I look half as good when I'm your age. But have you eaten? Have you had supper? Look at me. Do I look like I'm on a diet? I eat all the time. Maybe just a little more coffee. Maybe you need a little something to eat, Claire said. Claire's right, Madeline. A little food will perk you up. I should be treating you two kids, but after all these years, now on a fixed income, I still have to watch my pennies. But who's complaining? Every once in a while I come in here. Reminds me of the good old days. My husband Benny and I came here all the time. We'd listen to jazz at the Gaslight, have a few cocktails, then stroll arm in arm across the street for corned beef sandwiches in this very room. He's gone 19 years, March 29th. The tears stalled and her eyes rolled down her cheeks, just the two in unison. She dabbed at them with her napkin. I patted her shoulder. Claire hadn't touched her food. She placed half her Reuben and 2 latkes on the empty saucer and stationed it in front of Madeline. Share this with me, Claire said. Oh, honey, my God, I can't accept this. I'll never eat all of it, Claire assured her. God love you too. Madeline seemed more animated, more with it, suddenly. Maybe it was the food, which she ate with relish. When the waiter strolled by, we ordered cheesecake and more coffee. It was after 5 o'clock. Folks filtered in for beer and sandwiches. Young people with real jobs and dresses, khaki and seersucker suits, aging old money Pittsburgh, Madeline's age, and denim and Madras wraparounds and summer jumpers, Lacoste shirts with that infantile alligator on the left breast, sockless, and penny and tassel loafers. The bar instantly packed. Waiters and waitresses peeled out the swinging kitchen doors with trays of food. My real parents, Travis and Rita Sweeney, worked in restaurants. At least my dad did. My mother was a hostess at an almost unmentionable joint on Baum Boulevard. The sun, streaking the tables, leaned on the immense window front of the gazebo. A beam singled out Madeline. For a moment, she was 30 years younger. With great pomp, she rose from the table. Running into you two this afternoon has been such a gift. To see you, Joey, after all these years, and your beautiful bride-to-be. And thank you for sharing your food and the cheesecake and all of it. Believe me when I say I can't remember the last time I enjoyed myself like this. Why don't you stay another few minutes, Claire said. I'm going to walk down to the corner and catch the 73 back to East Liberty. I still live in our little place on Lenora Street. It's getting bad down there. But where am I going to go? Home is home. The house Benny and I moved into when we first married. We never had children. Twice, almost. I'm just thankful to have a roof over my head. Claire and I stood. We embraced Madeline and kissed her. She dipped into her purse and produced a small, heart-shaped casket with a mother-of-pearl patina, a gold cross at its center. She placed it in Claire's hand. "Open it," she said. Inside was a delicate silver rosary with tiny crystal beads. Christ's nimbus fanned the transverse beams of the crucifix. At his feet furled the word, Natalia. Claire sat back down and covered her mouth with her hands. "Madeline," she whispered, then she cried, softly through her hand. "It's too beautiful. This is just a little something, an early wedding present, whatever you want to call it. Congratulations and God bless you," Madeline said. "We can't accept this, Madeline," I said. "It's nothing, honest to God. What am I going to do with this kind of stuff? My house is filled with it. Like that, what's it called, the Sacred Heart of Jesus store down on Liberty Avenue? And give your grandmother, your whole family my love. Tell them old Madeline said hello, Madeline DeSantis, and tell them shame on me for not being in better touch." "I'll do that, Madeline," I said. She patted my cheek and said, "Don't forget me. I've never forgotten you." Then she walked out the door and disappeared into the summer evening thrall that awaited Claire and me. Thank you. Thanks, folks. I mean, I'm glad to take questions if you have them.
Beautiful visuals.
Oh, thank you.
I was watching the movie as you were speaking, and you really have a knack for the details, the swinging door in the restaurant, and all the kind of commotion and things that go on in that little restaurant. And I just, it's a beautiful way of bringing us in, because
Thank you.
I was in.
Oh, great.
And what a great, wonderful way to honor people in life that go through that as they age, and all those misrepresentations and things that happen. I think all of us have probably experienced it. There's so much charm out there, and it was nice to hear your characters tap into their charming elements when they were faced with this deceptive, which is really great.
Yeah.
So good job on that.
Well, thank you. It was just lovely.
Sorry, I just.
No,
can't
I
help
love it.
I'm
Keep it
high
coming,
tonight
please.
Watching the movie.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Any questions? Or?
What gave you the idea to write, or what was the impetus for the character of Madeline?
When this place, the gazebo, was a real place that I used to go to. And I'd go in there sometimes, certainly with young women, but just sometimes with my buddies. And there was a woman who worked behind the counter who thought she knew me. And she would give us free food all the time because she knew me. So because she would give us free food all the time, I just went with this masquerade that I knew her, figuring at some point, because times were rough, we were students, you know, we thought it was funny. She wasn't this pathetic woman. I had a bigger heart than that. You know, I was just broke. And she would give us cookies and blintzes and this and that. And I was able, and I was being arrogant, and I never thought like I was stringing her along. But she wasn't in these kinds of straits either. You hear me rationalizing this from going right now. And again, I was getting a kick out of it. My buddies got a charge out of it, you know, and she gave us free food all the time. So every time we went in, and I would just kind of say things. It was always, "How's your grandmother?" and I would always say, she's great, you know, and what about her pizza? And my grandmother did make really great pizza, except my grandmother was making it in heaven at that point. And I would say, yeah, no, it's great, you just saw her, the pizza was terrific, it was wonderful. And so this sort of charade went on until, I don't know, maybe she stopped working there, I went to grad school, I grew up, I did whatever. So that was the impetus, just that idea, Noah, just like because and I kept thinking, when is this going to cave in on me too? And I was so deeply into it too. I would have been ashamed to say, like, I've been lying to you to get cookies and blintzes for 3 years, and she would kiss me, and I liked that. I began to love her, you know. So that's really where the story. And then like I mentioned in class, and then I exaggerated. I told lies. I stretched. I exaggerated. The Claire character is not, you know, I sort of made up the Claire character is like a composite. I did go to see Citizen Kane because I was trying to impress a girl with how, you know, just how what a sharp intellect I had, etc., that kind of thing. And she was beyond my ken at that point, and so that's where it came from. And then, you know, again, as I always say, you know, you don't write these things in an afternoon. I mean, you keep going back to it. I didn't know how I was going to get out of the story, if that makes any sense, because you don't typically know. You don't know, as I always, again, harp, you don't know the end of the story often. You know, you enter it and you just pray that you'll be able to get out of it alive. So I didn't know where it was going at all. You know. The only really huge regret, and I wrote this story a while ago, well before the book was published, is that her last name is DeSantis. Yes, that really upsets me to say that word that many times as I read the story.
Spelled it DeSantis in the print.
Right. In the next printing, we'll change that. It'll just be DeSanti or something. DeSantus. She'll be. Yeah. Anybody else? And you certainly don't have to ask questions. It's in my power to dismiss you. Certainly. Yes, please.
The religious meanderings with the rosaries and the trinkets and the name, how much of your own background, in your own religious upbringing, did you find wonderful to weave in and out of these stories?
You know,
Because it really, I was raised a Catholic, trust me. There's a lot of dark depth there.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I don't feel the darkness as much as just the festoonery of Catholic iconography and just stuff in our house, you know. There was stuff. It's kind of funny because there was stuff that my mother said had to stay in the cellar. So it's just too weird, you know. I mean, it was too, you know, like a pretty large plaster, almost as big as my torso, of the Pietà. And my mother said, that's not coming upstairs, you know, and stuff like that. And even wedding presents they got, that she would, because my parents, I got it in school pretty hard and heavy, but not at home. My parents weren't religious maniacs, you know. They just, we didn't, thank God that wasn't at home at all. But we all had scapulars and we all had our saints thing and rosaries, and I like all that stuff. I like it crazy. And the rosary that I have, that I describe, is a rosary I actually have. That when my mother died, I found a lot of her stuff sort of secreted in a back drawer, you know, because she would have found that a little bit ostentatious and a little too much, I think. So I just described what was in front of me, you know. It was right there, and it did have that little Italia inscribed there. And it's gorgeous, you know. It's gorgeous as like art objects, all that stuff. So I love it for that, and you know. And I also hope that it's emanating magic and good things all around. Anybody else? Yeah, Laura, Randy? I like that we're going right to the religious profession.
Yes, I'm not gonna ask you a religion.
No, go ahead.
No, I want to ask you a process question.
Uh-huh.
I was recently reading an article about Ursula Le Guin, and in it, she was reflecting to the interviewer about her long process of like every plot piece being sort of laid out before she sat down to write. But what you said there about how you don't necessarily know how you're going to get out of the story made me kind of wonder if you could reflect for us a little bit on what your process is like. I mean, obviously there's writing and rewriting,
Sure,
that kind
sure.
of thing, but
Yeah,
structure.
I mean, most of the writers I know will say that they're not sure how their stories will end. You know, and we have filmmakers and other writers in here and visual artists, and I don't know if that process is different from them. The only person I've ever heard that said that she knew absolutely how things would end is Lee Smith told me one time. She always knows her ending and she puts it on a sticky note above her computer and then writes toward that ending. When you know the ending, what a blessing. I mean, it is, because there's some anxiety like, okay, I've got a great story, but I don't know how to end it. And endings are notoriously difficult. So I don't plot anything out. I take messy notes, Laura. I kind of have, you know, I have a sense of where I'm going, but the process, I'm more interested in the process than the product, and as I go along. And you figure if you write maybe, I don't know, a novel, or even if you write a story over the course of maybe 2, 3, 4 months, you change, the story changes, the character changes. They kind of start telling you what to do in a lot of ways. Flannery O'Connor said famously once that she could not tell her characters what to do. In The Color Purple, Alice Walker said that she felt more like a medium, that she sort of summoned the characters and they came to her. Yeah, so I'm just kind of figuring, maybe I'm seeing it more than anything in terms of the cinematic quality. I'm going into the gazebo and I'm sitting at those tables and I'm waiting for all those obnoxious people to come in at the end, you know. And it's a story about class too. You know, Madeline's still living on Lenore Street, you know, in 2 rooms and on a fixed income. And the Gaslight was a real place, and all those, you know, all those places are vanished except sometimes in the imagination. Randy?
It feels to me like the story's all in good fun until that gift, right? That where Madeline gives her something that actually is valuable. And I wonder if you could kind of talk about that turn.
Yeah, and it really is the turn. It's sort of like the crisis. You know, I'm always harping about conflict and crisis. We usually say conflict, crisis, and resolution, but I don't really believe in resolution. I can't think of any story or novel that really is resolved or a bow tied on it. You know, yeah, that's when they are complicit and have committed maybe a sin. They've already started to do that. You know, they shouldn't have done this to her. But then they start to love her.
Yeah.
They want to keep her in their lives, you know, and even they're related. When Claire says to him, "I love you," she really means it. You know, she really means it in something. You know, Madeline is this apparition, maybe this angelic figure that comes into their life, and through her, they see their relationship deepen because they care for her, but then they take something really sacred that belonged to her. And I don't know what will happen. Will it change their lives in some ways? There's that famous scene in A Good Man is Hard to Find, Flannery O'Connor's famous story where the grandmother reaches out and touches the misfit, and he shoots her 3 times in the chest, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, I might add. And somebody asked Flannery about that, and she said that she hoped that the touch of the misfit would bloom like a great crowfield tree in the misfit's heart, and that he would somehow be changed by that. It's that moment of grace that Flannery O'Connor talks about all the time. So I'm, you know, they have to have that, you know, and it means something. you know, what will happen? Will they ever see Madeline again? Probably not. You know, they'll probably talk about it later or something. But that would ruin the story too, because then you explain away that maybe the voltage at the end. Not saying that it is a good story as it is, I hope it is, but you know, you always toy with the ending. Should I stop it here, 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 here? And usually you should stop it earlier than later, because then you mess it up and you know, and then you lecture about what it's all about if you're not careful. I could read, I have a short piece that I could read, like a flash piece if you wanted me to. Okay, I will. Thank you, thank you. It has profanity in it. You know what, it's really funny, all these years of teaching, like a million, and I still get squeamish when I have to read profanity in front of my students. But sometimes they out-profane me, so they're okay. I'm going to read, in this, because you all will be workshopping flash pieces, this is a piece of flash fiction. And it's called My Only Crack at Beauty. And it's Fritz narrating. Fritz goes to see, and I'm so sorry to say this is vaguely autobiographical as well. This didn't happen exactly like this, where this kid, and he's much younger here. You know, here he was 20 in the previous story. He is 16 here, okay? And he goes to visit his girlfriend at a babysitting job in a very high-dollar neighborhood far away from where he lives. And the girlfriend is sort of a high-dollar girlfriend too. It's her neighborhood. And again, it's called My Only Crack at Beauty. And it won't take long. It's Flash. Colleen admits me through the Stearns patio door. We kiss a long time. She smells of chlorine. She and Jonathan have been in the pool. He's already down for the night. I love my visits to the Stearns. Colleen and I play with Jonathan, 11 months old, cute, content, cooperative, beginning to toddle and babble. Then Colleen and I alone in this exquisite house. All glass, mirrors, white carpet, high ceilings, dangling chrome lamps, paintings that cover entire walls, a foyer bigger than my backyard on St. Marie Street, bathrooms like spaceships. Colleen and I eventually migrate upstairs to the Stearns' bedroom. We lie on their plush white bedspread and drink their vodka and orange juice out of monogrammed cocktail glasses. The late summer sun dwindles across us. One of the glasses falls from the nightstand and breaks. Colleen does her best to clean up what's left of the screwdriver, but it's white carpet. I throw the towel and broken glass in the bathroom trash. Colleen cries. I put my arm around her. That's when the Stearns, home much earlier than expected, walk through their big front doors. They've insisted Colleen have the run of the house while she babysits Jonathan, but made a point when they hired her. No boys on the premises. We hurry down the winding plexiglass staircase into the foyer. Right away, the Stearns notice Colleen's been crying, but of course they don't know me. Mr. Stern is handsome, beautifully dressed. I'm ashamed to be meeting him like this. He stretches out a hand. I'm Macy Stern. I take his hand. I'm Fritz Sweeney. Fritz is my friend, says Colleen. She stands beside me. This is my wife, Melissa, says Mr. Stern. Mrs. Stern is tall, dressed in black, one hand on her hip, long brown hair, dark eyes, a silver bracelet. How do you do, Mrs. Stern? She too shakes my hand, says hello, Fritz. Then zeroing in on Colleen, is Jonathan all right? Jonathan has been fast asleep in his crib upstairs, but he suddenly begins to cry. Mrs. Stern races by us for the stairs. Colleen clasps her hands together, her fingernails bit and red. She wears green and yellow striped bell-bottoms low on her hips. Her blonde hair is thick and long all over her face and down her back. Big, wet eyes, ultramarine. She's trying not to cry, fretting her hands. She is 14 years old. Sweet, anxious, fantastically beautiful girl I can't live without. My only crack of beauty. Mrs. Stern returns holding Jonathan. He's happy, clutching his mother's dress. Colleen hugs him, but he isn't friendly. He looks like his father. Colleen kisses Jonathan, tells him she loves him. I pat him and say, see you, buddy. He's got it made. He'll inherit all this. Mr. Stern peels off bills from a money clip and hands them to Colleen. She thanks him lavishly. He smiles and holds out a $100 bill to me. I've never seen one before. 10 times, but he's just given Colleen. Mrs. Stern looks at her husband like, what the hell are you doing? Colleen is perhaps too distraught to notice or doesn't find anything fishy about this. I'm not clear what this is all about. Maybe it's a setup, some kind of sucker game, test. Maybe the 100 is a bribe, hush money, to prevent me from divulging something. But what? Maybe Mr. Stern is just being generous. Maybe I'm a peasant, and he's used to buying peasants. I never want to see your sorry ass again. But what is Colleen? Not a peasant. Her father, like Macy Stern, is an attorney. Colleen scored this babysitting job because the Sterns and her parents are friends. They live in the same exclusive block. My parents work for tips. I don't know how long it takes them to make $100. I grew up around guys who would break Mr. Stern's jaw for insulting them with money, even though they covet all he has. My dad isn't one of them, but I wonder what he'd do in my place. My mother would tell Mr. Stern to shove goofy-looking Ben Franklin up his ass. I'll never see Mr. Stern and his wife and baby again. I'll never set foot in their home again, nor will Colleen, at least not as their babysitter. The worry is that the Sterns will call Colleen's parents, whom I've never met. They don't even know about me. Colleen and I are brand new. We have a future together. It will be the end of us if the Sterns call, and the end of Colleen. The Sterns are sure to discover we've dipped into their booze. There's the towel and broken glass, the mussed bed. Colleen says she'd love to sit for Jonathan again sometime. Things seem amiable enough. We say goodbye to the Sterns. Melissa Stern, swaying Jonathan to sleep on her shoulder and rubbing his back, smiles for the first time, though she nervously glances at that C note her husband dangles in front of me while Colleen, about to break down, remains oblivious. Mr. Stern has never stopped smiling. It might be a smirk. Take it or don't take it, you worthless fucking peasant. Whatever you do, it's your funeral. Aren't you glad you asked? Anyhow, thanks a million for being here.